Homebrew.
Prewritten.
Homebrew.
Prewritten.
Homebrew.
Homebrew.
Prewritten.
What?
What's up, wormlings? Welcome to the Blue Dragon Guild. We are a channel all about Dungeons and Dragons. I'm Baron.
I'm Chris.
Today we are talking about the eternal debate, homebrew games or pre-written adventures. For me, when it comes to running games, I prefer homebrew. I like that aspect of the game.
I used to, but I love pre-written right now.
Both of these things have their place and their pros and cons. We're going to go over just a few of the things that we like about each thing and a few things we dislike about each thing.
So what I really like about pre-written is it's super easy for new dungeon masters or even returning dungeon masters from old editions to jump right back in to D&D, and you still get all that nostalgic feel, and it's all right here in one book.
When we started out in 5th edition, you and Dave had already been playing for about a year, and then Tommy and I jumped in, and you guys had already figured the system out, and you already came up with your own homebrew world. But since then, we have taken a dive into some of the pre-written stuff, and as a player, I've loved it. We've had a lot of fun running the games, Yawning Portal, Icewind Dale, which we just finished, and those were all really great. But I think that can lead into one of the downsides of the pre-written games. There's a lot you have to sift through.
That is true. There is a lot of lore, and there's, even if you're not into that and you want to kind of make it your own right out of the gate, there is a lot to read and a lot more prep than I think a homebrew game has. So that, forewarned, if you do that, there is a lot of prep and time investment on the part of the DM.
Yeah, and when we did Icewind Dale, that was Mackenzie's first game that he DM'd for longer than a one-shot.
Right.
And that's something that he encountered. There was just so much information to sift through. I think it overwhelmed him in some sense, but by the end of it, he had it down pat.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to happen. You're going to forget some things, even with notes. But again, when it's all in one book, you can mark the page, and there it is. Another thing that I really like about pre-written adventures and books is it's so easy to start and stop. So if you're kind of like us, where you don't always have a set schedule for your games and they might not get to go as long as you want because, you know, life gets in the way, you can start and stop and just mark the page and make a couple notes. Whereas in a homebrew world, if you don't sort of keep intricate notes, you're going to forget, your players are going to forget. This way I just grab the book, read a little summary, boom, we're right back into the game.
Yeah, me being the homebrew DM, that's something that I've had to do is keep intricate notes. After one of the last games we played, I typed up this huge summary of everything that happened, and I sent it in our group chat. And I was like, this is what happened. That way we have it for next time. So unless you're going to be very diligent about that, you may have a few issues when it comes to homebrew and starting and stopping. I still think homebrew is more enjoyable. And my reason for that is I really like creating stuff. I like coming up with stories for lore. I like drawing maps. I know you have had a lot of fun drawing your maps, coming up with your worlds. You just like pre-written better.
I do. I love, like he said, everything that he just said with it. I love creating things as well, but I often hit really big writer's block. And when it comes down to it, I like to be a very simple DM. So I'm a little lazy sometimes. So I like to just whip out the book. Here we are. This is where we stopped. And then fill a little gap in along the way. I am really bad at taking notes. I always ask the group where we stopped, what happened. So for me, I am not a good note taker.
So when it comes to a homebrew game, you can tailor that to however you want. Whatever the story is, you can kind of morph that to your group and kind of their backstories. And with a pre-written adventure, it's not impossible to do that, but sometimes the way the story flows, it's a little more difficult. And going back to Icewind Dale, I think that's one thing that we did have an issue with. It was, well, why would we care about this? But it just happened that all the places we went were the places where people didn't like us.
Exactly. So, and that is a thing. I will acknowledge that the story is a little more outlined and linear in most of the books. Icewind Dale was one of the exceptions. You can do, like he said, you can do a lot.
Yeah.
But with that comes maybe we didn't go to the spot that we think we needed to go, and now the story feels like it didn't make sense because we sort of did it out of order, but we didn't know there was an order.
Yeah.
That is the one complaint a lot of people have with the books. I don't mind that, and I don't mind linear stuff because everything has wiggle room. The book is a guideline, and the people that wrote it, and D&D in general says, yes, play by these rules, but still make them their own. Because you can't just go, okay, we did a dungeon, now let's go to the next dungeon. If it's designed that way, yes, but most of them, you're going to have downtime. You're going to have camps. You're going to have to, as a DM, fill in, we don't want to do the adventure. We're going to go off, a different direction. Well, now it's my time to shine and actually incorporate a little bit of homebrew stuff in there to make this version of whatever setting you're in actually your own. Yeah. So you still can do that without going full world building homebrew.
Yeah, and that, like you said, that is a great way to do that. You can use things like that to start into the world of homebrewing, and you can also just use it to make the Forgotten Realms, Eberron, wherever you're playing, a little bit your own.
Right. The one of the other books, the Sword Coast Guide, actually suggests that there's so much uncharted land and billions of inhabitants that it really encourages you to do that. I mean, that's how it started, was people making up their own stuff, and then the world came out of it, and now D&D, I'm glad this edition really pushes you to do that.
Yeah.
And your players are never going to know that it's something that's not in that book unless they read it.
As I stated earlier, I really like making the maps and doing all the handout stuff. But sometimes I can be a little lazy. I'll forget, I'll procrastinate, and then it's game day and I don't have this stuff. The great thing with the pre-written stuff, all that's already there for you.
That's right.
It's got the maps, it's got the dungeons. You don't have to worry about anything. All you have to do is find your copier, place your book on, hit print.
And these are very nice, very detailed, nice. And even the little adventures, there's character sheets in some of the books. Mm-hmm. There's so much material. Like he said, you just have to copy it, give it out to your players. They can keep it. You make a copy for yourself, so if you do forget, you come back, oh yeah, I gave you this thing. Or if they forget information, hey, it's in this handout, we can review it. But I really like that. I also like, in Homebrew, I love dungeon building. I like designing the levels. That's the fun for me, is the encounter building.
Yeah.
And you can still do that, but it is more outlined. And in the book, the only downside of that for me is that it is pretty structured based on your level. So yeah, I can add in an extra monster or two, but adding in a completely different monster, that might throw off the story.
Yeah. So one fun aspect of homebrewing is monster creation. We did a video on that. I will post a link down in the description. Sometimes there's an encounter going on, and in the pre-written stuff, they've got the monster manual monsters, Volo's Guide, Mordenkainen's, and those are all amazing monsters, don't get me wrong. But sometimes it's really, really fun to make your own monster. There's plenty of times that I've created a monster just off of a random thought, and it's made an appearance in the games, and everybody at the table is fairly experienced at D&D, and they're like, what monster was that? What book's that in? Is that in one of those Tome of Beasts? Nope. It's from the old noggin.
Yeah, I'll give you that. That is very fun, and with Homebrew, you can do it on the fly and have a reason why it happens. If I do it in a book campaign, I can still do that, of course. It's Dungeons and Dragons. However, people that are really hardcore into the D&D lore are going to ask about it. I don't think that sounds weird. Why would this happen? Or why would this happen? You're going to have a lot of questions. Yeah. And you don't want to just give the old, well, I'm the DM, I wanted to do it, generic answer, even though that might have been the truth. You really have to think about it. Again, back to the planning is in the research is part of that. Whereas Homebrew, it happened.
Yep.
I mean, and even that goes down to the little things, magic items on the fly. I know you had that cool lightning beer thing that was really I love that. That was
Thunder Brew Ale.
It was so awesome, and just it didn't matter to anything at the time. Yeah. It was just a neat little quirk. Well, that's all homebrew stuff. If I threw that in Icewind Dale, maybe it'll make sense there, but if I throw it into some wilderness campaign where beer might not be a thing, it's going to look a little weird.
Yeah.
So that is something to consider, is just picking up a monster and doing whatever you want with it, versus there's going to be a stat block, there's going to be lore, there's going to be pages of stuff in here, and there still might be unique monsters. That happened in all the books, have a couple monsters that are unique to those books, but everything else is from a core book.
So one great thing I like about the pre-written adventures, you can borrow anything and everything and just slap it into your homebrew world. There's a couple encounters that are in the Yawning Portal book that I kind of wove in to one of our games. I changed it a good bit, so when we actually ran Yawning Portal, no one knew what it was. It was really fun. That's one of those things, if you're being lazy, it's already done. Just change some names, change the location, good to go. So if you prefer Prewritten, if you prefer Homebrew, tell us about it down in the comments. Tell us about some of the awesome games that you and your parties have played.
If you'd like to see more D&D content from us, please hit that subscribe button.
And if you want to see our video about Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden, check it out right here. And until next time, keep the dice rolling.